So next, I'm going to work on generating my PM2.5 data files. So I need to go back to the left side of the form here and make some changes because my PM2.5 monitor is located at a different site than my ozone monitor. So first I need to change my site ID. So my PM2.5 monitor is at 0002. My sampler ID is PM25. This is POC3, and my parameter is, these are the things I enter when I set up my sampler with my AQS monitor protocol data. These are the things I entered in the previous module. My method is the MAM. My units, and notice I have 2 units here. Micrograms per cubic meter is the units of my pollutant concentration data, and then for my QC check, I have flow rates in liters per minute. That's why we had to enter those 2 units in the previous module. So I want to start with my pollutant concentration data file, my RD file. So I will select that. And my sample duration is 1 hour. Now I need to change my date range here. And let me check my notes and make sure I have the correct date range. So my logbook says 1/5/2015 through 1/19/2015. So I highlight these and type over them. And then I have the option of assigning 0 value continuous pollutant records if there were gaps in my data. However, as with my ozone data, I don't have complete days yet in my toolbox, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to skip that step, and I go down to the select AQS format type, and I'm going to leave the default of pipe delimited because that's what I'm comfortable with. And now I have the option of assigning AQS flags, and for my PM2.5 data, I'd like to do that because what I want to do is tell AQS that some of my data were less than the MDL. You don't have to do this. So let's see how this works. So if I want to flag data that's less than the MDL, that's a quality assurance type of flag. So I select quality assurance. And then I click on the manually add AQS flags button. So there's also informational only, and there's request exclusion options. And what those flags have to do with are events. So for example, high winds, fires, etc. that might affect your concentration data. The request exclusion flags, they're the same flags as the informational only flags. However, by doing the request exclusion, you're asking AQS to exclude the data. So there's additional steps you need to do in AQS if you assign an exceptional event flag. And that is covered in the AQS exceptional event tutorial. And we have a link to that tutorial in the notes document for this module. So if you need more information on that, that's there for you. I'm going to do quality assurance, so I select that. And then I click on the manually add AQS flags button. So we get this query. And something to notice about this query is that it shows the toolbox flags, then it shows the AQS null value flags, and then it shows the AQS flags. So remember that the toolbox flags are not included in your AQS formatted file. Notice here when I have an AQS null value code assigned, and remember, you can only assign AQS null value codes during the final data validation step in the toolbox. So that I had assigned this invalidation code in the final data validation step, and that nulled out my concentration for my AQS formatted file. So that's the important difference between AQS null value codes and AQS flags. What I want to do is let EPA know what values are below the MDL. And these are the low values that the toolbox assigned the flag of R to. But I decided not to assign an AQS null value code since I decided that the concentrations are valid. So for each of these values, I'm going to assign an AQS flag. So here's the first one that's below the MDL, and it has a flag of R. So to do that, I click in the AQS flag column, and it comes up with this drop-down box. So I click on the drop-down box, and that shows all of the flags that are available for QA flags that could be used for my PM2.5 data. So let's see, we have this flag right here, MD, value less than MDL. Perfect, that's what I need. So I will select that. And now the next one I also want to assign the same flag to. remember there's a Toolbox shortcut for assigning the same flag in consecutive rows. That shortcut is the Control plus the apostrophe key on your keyboard. So I press Control apostrophe on my keyboard, and that assigns the same flag to the next record. So here's another one. Now, in this particular instance, I can't use Control apostrophe because it would just copy the blank record of the previous one. So I need to go back and select MD, but I can use my cool Toolbox shortcut here, Control apostrophe, Control apostrophe, Control apostrophe. I'm going to keep doing this for each of my less than MDL values. Very fun and exciting stuff. Let's see, so these ones were invalidated. So again, remember that that was due to that tape error, and they are showing up as null codes here. And there's the AQS null code. So I will scroll down because I invalidated all of those. HD6, that's just because consecutive measurements were greater than 6. I don't want to flag those. I only want to flag those with an R. So I'll just scroll through. And there's another one with an R. And scroll through some more. And that looks like all of them. So I need to pull out my super duper effective little help me out database logbook and write this down in my database logbook that I assigned an AQS flag of MD to these records that were less than the MDL. And I need to go through, if I was being super efficient, I would go through and count how many I assigned this AQS flag to and write that in my database logbook as well. That's what I wanted to do. So I'm going to go ahead and close this query because I completed assigning those AQS flags. So I will close that query and move on. Now I need to go to the raw data output steps here. So the first thing I want to do is inspect the data. So again, for my data set, I just have zeros here. So the toolbox is not giving me any warnings about my data. And I'm just going to scroll through these data. And again, notice my AQS null value code and my concentration value is nulled out. So I'm just going to scroll through my data, give it a quick look. Here's something very, 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 very important to notice. So I assigned an AQS flag here of MD, remember, because the value is less than the MDL. But my concentration values are not nulled out. This is the very important difference between an AQS flag and an AQS null value code. So here's my tape error, and everything looks good. Looks good to go to me. And I'll scroll back up to the top and close this report, and I will generate my RD file. So I click on the Create AQS RD File button, and it tells me that my file's named AQSRD.txt, and it's found in the Tribal Data Toolbox folder. So okay, and now let's take a look at that file. Beautiful. Again, the important difference here, notice the AQS null value code of AN, and notice that the value is, the concentration value is null. Here's the difference between the AQS flag. So here's the flag of MD for the values that are below the minimum detectable limit, and they are still in there. My concentration values are still there for those. They are not nulled out. That's because this is the AQS flag and not an AQS null value code. So I will scroll through this. Here was the tape error with all those AQS null value codes. That looks good to me. Remember that every time the toolbox generates this file, it names them the same thing, and they're in the same folder. So I need to rename this and move it to a different folder in order to prevent the toolbox from overwriting this file. So I will do a file save as, and I am going to find that folder that I use for my AQS files. And let's rename it using the same convention I have been using. So I type in PM25 as my pollutant. My site ID is 0002, and it's an RD file. And my date range is 01/05/15 through 01/09/19/15. So I double check that I entered everything correctly, and I click save. and then I will close this file. So the next thing I want to do is generate my PM2.5 QA file, and that consists of the flow rate checks for the date range selected. So those buttons are in this green area here, enclosed by the green frame under quality assurance data. So I need to tell the toolbox what type of check that I want to include by selecting the type of assessment from the drop-down box. And remember that this is the same box that is on the Toolbox QC data entry form. So for PM data, there are two options, which is the flow rate verification and the semi-annual flow rate audit. So up to this point, I have only entered flow rate verification checks in, and that's the checks I perform with my own handheld flow rate standard. I do those routine checks bi-weekly. And so I need to select flow rate verification. If I had also done a semi-annual flow rate audit during this date range, I would need to generate the QA file twice, once for the flow rate verification and once for the semi-annual flow rate audit. But I only have flow rate verifications for this particular date range. So then I click on the Inspect Data button. Okay, so notice this incorrect unit selection. This is why it's really important to read these message boxes. So it tells me the selected unit is not a flow rate unit. Select an appropriate flow rate unit in the reported units field to continue. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I have to change my flow rate units because right now this is set to micrograms per cubic meters. So I need to change this to liters per minute before I can generate my QA file. So I will do that and click on that button again. Okay, better. It says it's telling me about the co-located sampler. Again, I don't have a co-located sampler, but I read this anyways and click OK. And now I see my data, and this shows the two flow rate checks I entered into the toolbox during the date range selected, and everything looks good. I'm an actual value, an indicated value, and I click on the X button to close this query, and then I click on Create AQS QA file, and it tells me that this is the name of the file and this is where it lives for now, but I am going to relocate it, so I click OK, because I don't want the toolbox to overwrite it. So View AQS QA file, here it is, everything looks great. All I need to do is do a file save as and move this file to where it's supposed to go with all its friends. Where is its friends? Here are its friends. Okay, let's give it a nice name. PM25 0002. This is a QA file and same date range. And I double check to make sure I entered everything correctly. Looks good, and I click save. And that saved it in its correct home. And I am happy I finished my ozone and my PM2.5 AQS-Ready files, and they are ready to submit to AQS.